We're about to unravel a historical paradox that perfectly bridges the gap between the smog-filled streets of the Victorian era and, well, the smartphone that's probably sitting in your pocket right now. We are looking back at the year 1888, the industrial genesis of the football derby, and taking a journey that is honestly going to completely change how you view modern sports media.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because right out of the gate, we are faced with this seemingly impossible premise. Can a weblog, a format that's inherently tied to the digital age, the very word blog wasn't even coined until the late 1990s, can that actually exist over a century before the internet was even invented? Now, on the surface, the answer seems like a hard no. But if we dig just a little bit deeper into the actual function of sports media, things get incredibly interesting.
Because at its core, what is a blog? It's simply an ongoing, chronological record of thoughts, opinions, and observations about a specific subject. That's it. When we strip away the pixels, the servers, the messy comment sections, and just look at the raw purpose of the medium, a massive shift in perspective happens. Under this exact criteria, the very first Derby blog wasn't typed out on a clunky laptop in 1999. It was actually written with ink way back in 1888.
Which brings us to Section 1, the 1888 Derby Paradox, a quest for a ghost.
Our source material actually puts this perfectly. It says, searching for a literal first Derby blog is a quest for a ghost. And, obviously the internet did not exist. But while the literal technology is a ghost, the cultural phenomenon is very, very real. The year 1888 wasn't just another random year in history. It was the true genesis of modern derby culture. It was the catalyst for the exact types of intense, localized rivalries that we now obsessively document in our digital age. And to solve this mystery, we have to jump back in time.
Moving on to Section 2, Birth of the League, from friendlies to fierce rivalries.
To really understand the conditions that created modern football discourse, we need to picture the smog-filled, industrial heart of Northern England. So, before 1888, football was highly fragmented. Teams were mostly playing isolated friendly matches or just competing in localized cup tournaments. But then, everything accelerated. On April 17th, the Football League was formed, and just a few months later, by September 8th, the first official league fixtures kicked off. This completely changed the geography of the sport forever. It was no longer just about kicking a ball around on a weekend. It became this highly organized battle for supremacy within the local labor force.
Now, among that opening volley of matches on that September day was Bolton Wanderers versus Derby County. Now, fun fact, the term Derby was actually already in use for horse racing, specifically the Epsom Derby, which dates all the way back to 1780. But the fierce, localized rivalry sparked by this new Football League structure provided the absolute perfect social conditions to bring that term right onto the football pitch. And we definitely can't look back at this pivotal day without mentioning James Kenny Davenport, who made history by scoring the very first Football League goal, forever changing competitive football.
So, the crucial point here is that 1888 introduced an entirely new vocabulary to the fan experience. Suddenly, almost overnight, you had the league table, the fixture list, the sheer, nail-biting anxiety of a relegation battle. For the very first time, fans weren't just watching isolated, meaningless games. They had a standardized weekly metric to track and, more importantly, fiercely argue over. The league structure essentially gave them the comparative framework that makes modern sports debates possible.
And that perfectly sets up Section 3, from ink to pixels, the original fan bloggers.
This evolution is just absolutely fascinating. We've shifted from the ink-stained broadsheets of the 19th century, papers like the Manchester Guardian and the Sheffield Telegraph, straight to the glowing pixels of today's smartphones. But structurally, they serve as the exact same platform. The 19th century newspapers were literally the blogs of their time, delivering the exact same raw, unvarnished sports commentary that we scroll through today.
Actually, scratch the idea that Victorian writers were all proper and polite. Those early 1888 match reports weren't dry, objective summaries of facts. No way. They were deeply, openly biased. They featured biting critiques of player performance and these fiery editorials designed to actively fuel local rivalries. These early journalists were, for all intents and purposes, the fan bloggers of their era. They used rumors and incredibly strong opinions to solidify the distinct identities of these clubs, pitting towns, factories, and social classes right up against one another. They gave us the narrative structure of the game. They gave us the villains, the plucky underdogs, and that deep sense of provincial pride. These early match reports established the very storytelling framework and narrative tropes that still completely dominate modern football discourse.
When a modern blogger writes about a heroic underdog or a bitter local villain today, they're using a storytelling vocabulary that was literally invented in the industrial era.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, the never-ending narrative, the ongoing Derby blog. When we realize that the original match reports functioned exactly like modern blogs, this really beautiful realization emerges. The source material explains that every modern Derby blog is merely writing a new chapter in a century-long narrative. It is a chronological record that began with a local journalist sitting on a wooden bench at Pikes Lane or Anfield back in 1888, scribbling down the very first official record of a league match. We aren't starting new blogs today. We are all just adding entries to the longest-running blog in history.
So, I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. The next time you fire off a passionate post about your team's table position, or you're furiously arguing about a local rivalry online, is your latest online sports debate merely an echo of a Victorian journalist sitting on a wooden bench in 1888? The medium has definitely changed, but the unvarnished story? It remains exactly the same. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. And hey, keep questioning the history behind the things we do every single day.